Are social anxiety and trauma connected? And if so, how? Welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. So this actually was a question that was posed to me, and I wanted to take some time to respond to it. Well, I'm going to talk specifically about social anxiety. There's some aspects of this that are really relevant regardless of what you might be struggling with. Because in all reality, when you have a history of childhood trauma, all of the struggles that we have, there's a connection to the childhood trauma and what that created for us. So, any ongoing struggle anyway. So, social anxiety, depending on who you ask, you might get a different idea of what that actually means. But generally speaking, for the people that are likely going to be watching this video, social anxiety is anxiety that presents itself when you are out among people. And it could be people that you know, it could be people that are complete strangers, it could be big or situations with big events with lots of people, or it could even be just one or two people. So it really can mean a lot of different things. But I think the most important thing about this is that you recognize that when you are going to be in a situation where there are people, that you tend to feel anxious, and how that anxiety shows up for you can be different. But if you struggle with it, you know what it feels like for you, right? And so there are a lot of people who struggle with social anxiety in part because of childhood trauma. But whether it's childhood trauma or not, the struggle often happens because there is a fear of something happening. Now, that something could be something bad happening. So you could actually have a fear that you're going to be hurt, or everybody's going to be hurt, that there's going to be some sort of catastrophe that's going to happen. So it can be that. I would say, in terms of the people that I have spoken to over the years, the people that I've had conversations with and understand their trauma and how it impacts them, while that can certainly be a part of it, generally speaking, the social anxiety tends to come from fears, even if they're not conscious fears, of feeling or reacting in a particular way for yourself, that you will feel something in particular, or that you will respond or react to people in a particular way. And generally, that way would likely make you feel embarrassed or ashamed, judged, criticized, that kind of thing. Now, you may be, like I said, aware that you have those specific fears. Much of the time, you're not having conscious thoughts that you're afraid of that. So you're not getting ready and thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid that somebody's going to judge me, or I'm so afraid that I'm going to react to somebody in a negative way and cause a problem. Sometimes you can be, for sure, especially if it tends to be the same thought and fear over and over and over again. But even depending on the circumstance or who the people might be, your thoughts or specific fears may change a little bit around that. But ultimately, what's driving that, no matter what it looks like, what's driving that is fear around being seen, and often as a result of being seen, being judged. So the idea of I'm afraid of being seen may not be a conscious thought whatsoever. But because the trauma made you believe certain things about yourself, right? Those false core beliefs. I'm unworthy, I'm bad, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, whatever it might be. When you go out into a situation, whether it's one person or many, but many creates much more opportunity, right? So if you believe these things about yourself, when you go out into the world, we automatically assume, often not consciously, that other people are going to think the same thing about us. Other people are going to see those things about us that we don't like about ourselves. And therefore, we go out with an expectation of fear that somebody is going to think something like we think, that somebody is going to behave in a particular way because they're not going to like us. They're going to think that we are bad, that we're stupid, that whatever it is. And again, the things that are not in our conscious awareness can have even more impact than the things that we're aware of. Because if we're aware, I'm afraid somebody's going to think I'm stupid. Doesn't mean we're going to do it, but we then have the ability to be able to talk to ourselves, to remind ourselves that I have no reason to think that, or this person's never suggested to me before that they feel this way, or I don't even have to say anything to anybody if I don't want to, right? So you have the ability to really talk yourself through it, to help calm yourself. But if you're not really aware of what those specific fears are, then you can't address it at all. And when you have that fear, it's based on a belief. It's based on this really deeply ingrained fear of what you expect when you go out into the world. And again, that's based on your core beliefs. When that fear comes up, you have a physiological response to that, right? So maybe your heart starts beating faster. Maybe you feel nauseous. Maybe you feel this constriction and tightness in your body. When that happens, it feels very real, right? It feels as though those fears are true and happening. So your body responds even more. And it becomes this vicious cycle. And that's why oftentimes people who really struggle a lot with social anxiety can have a panic attack without even having to walk out their door. Because when your body is responding to it, and it becomes an automatic thing that happens, when your body starts responding in that fear response, and therefore that self-protective response, we can tend to want to pull back. We can tend to have that panic attack because it feels imminent that judgment, that shame is going to happen. In almost any time that we fear judgment, shame is right there with it. Our own shame. Not that other people will shame us, and not even necessarily that we have a fear that somebody else will shame us, but automatically the thing that we believe that we'll be judged about, we likely have shame around that to begin with. So again, recognizing that can really happen even just in a one-on-one situation. But it stems, generally speaking, and again, I'm talking about for survivors of childhood trauma, that social anxiety stems from those core beliefs and fears around how people will respond or show up. And oftentimes, those fears that we have about how people will respond or show up, like judge us or criticize us or think something negative about us, immediately it connects to the shame that we hold. And shame is the most destructive emotion that we experience, especially when that shame is so deeply ingrained. And we can experience shame on a very profound level without even being aware that we have any shame. So it's really quite significant. So what do you do? So yes, there can absolutely be a connection. And I think I've talked kind of about why there's this connection. So then what do you do about it? And this is part of the reason why so many people who struggle with, whether it's social anxiety or a number of other things really, can do some work around that, maybe even take medication for it, but it not really have a significant impact on the struggle that they have with it. And the reason for that is because, as I said, it's not addressing the root problem. And the root problem is that because you believe that you're bad or unworthy or stupid or whatever it is, that you assume that other people are going to think the same thing. Again, you don't have to be aware that you're thinking that. It's just an automatic thing that happens. So when you work on healing those core beliefs, and you are very intentional about practicing some very specific things related to kind of putting yourself out there, being around people, being mindful of what's happening and what's not happening, like you're not actually being judged. Even if you're telling yourself that this person is thinking something bad about you, there's a good likelihood that there's no real evidence to suggest at all that that person is thinking something negative about you. So as you work on healing those core beliefs, really deprogramming those core beliefs and healing the childhood trauma, it naturally changes how you feel in those social situations. Because when you feel more confident, when you can trust that people aren't judging you, criticizing you, hating you, thinking bad things about you, then your physiological response to going out in public isn't that intense fear response or even shame response. Instead, when you're thinking about going out and being among people, it's actually not even there. It's not something that even is present for you because it's no longer a fear that you're holding on to. And so I said holding on to. It's not that you're making a conscious choice to hold on to it. I want to be clear about that. But that fear is really a self-protective thing. But it's not actually protecting us from anything, but our body doesn't know that. Our body responds to fear by telling you to pull back and that it's not safe. That's all our body is doing. So when you work on healing, deprogramming those beliefs, and practicing intentionally putting yourself out there in different ways, then you are retraining how your body, your nervous system responds. When you can begin to have a different nervous system response, it helps you feel safer so that when you think about going out, you're not automatically responding with that intense fear response. So I hope that makes sense. So whether you struggle with social anxiety or bouts of feeling really low, depression, taking certain types of risks, even some self-harming behaviors, self-sabotaging behaviors, all kinds of things. When you work on deprogramming those beliefs, those false beliefs, those lies ultimately, and you are intentional about specific practices that help you heal, all of those symptoms naturally begin to dissolve away. Because all of those symptoms are a result of what you believe about who you are. And the thing about not just social anxiety, but one of the things about social anxiety or anxiety in interacting with people is also trust. If you've experienced childhood trauma, you struggle with trust. Whether it's conscious thoughts about not trusting people or not, naturally, you are going to struggle with trust, trusting other people, trusting yourself. And what that trust might be could be a number of things. It could be variable depending on how you're feeling that day or who the person is, all kinds of things. So trust plays a really significant role in pretty much everything in our lives. How we show up, how we feel, what we allow ourselves to want, what we allow ourselves to do. Trust plays a really significant role in that, other people and ourselves. And as you work on healing and engaging in some of these practices, you begin to build trust within yourself. As you begin to build trust within yourself, you're more able to trust other people because you're able to trust your own intuition. Instead of getting caught up in the fears physiologically or in terms of your thoughts, you feel more grounded because you trust yourself. So, is it connected? Yeah. But I think it's important to recognize that there are some very real things that you can do throughout this healing journey that help you in dealing with those things that sometimes it feels like you'll never be able to get through, that you'll never be able to actually change. And I've seen people be able to change things for themselves and how they experience things that they never really imagined they'd be able to do, including myself. So there is hope that whatever it is you're struggling with absolutely can change. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Can you relate to this? What did it bring up for you? What did you notice? Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up so other people can find it too. And if you haven't yet subscribed, make sure to do so and click the bell for notifications. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.